Good afternoon. The National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. And question one, Gwyn Price.
Thank you, Clywed. What discussions has the Welsh Government had regarding allowing 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in future referendums and tax-varying powers for Wales?
Well, such discussions would be needed if and when the Assembly agreed that there should be such a referendum, but extending the franchise for elections generally seems to me to be something that we should now consider very carefully, given the fact, of course, that it has already been done in Scotland for the referendum there.
Thank you for that answer. First Minister, it is important that we engage young people in the decisions affecting their lives. What actions has the Welsh Government taken to encourage young people to learn about politics, democracy, governing and citizenship at school?
Well, that's done primarily through the PSE element of the curriculum. It forms part of the basic curriculum for all registered pupils at maintained schools. But of course, as the member will be aware, a curriculum review is in the midst of taking place, and we expect that that curriculum review will report in the earlier part of next year. And of course, PSE may well be part of the review that takes place.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch. First Minister, I noticed that you didn't shut the door on the idea of lowering the voting age to 16. I've never been an advocate of lowering the voting age to 16 from 18. But in the vein of Gwyn Price's question, if you do go any way down that line, you will have to ensure that there is adequate education about the system and that younger people are fully knowledgeable of what is going on. So will you agree that you will not go down the line of supporting voting for 16-year-olds without looking at all other aspects of education and politics in schools?
I think there are wider issues. Now that, of course, it's been established that 16-year-olds could vote in one referendum in Scotland, it's logically difficult to say that, therefore, that shouldn't be extended to all elections. That said, of course, I think there is a need then for a wider debate, because traditionally being able to vote at a particular age has meant that that age has been seen as the age of majority or adulthood. So there would have to be a further debate on top of moving ahead with votes for 16 and 17-year-olds as to whether, in fact, we would want the age of adulthood to be brought down as well.
Lle Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd, wel mae pleidleisiau i bobl 1 ar 15 a 2 ar 15 wedi bod yn bolisi gan Blaid Cymru ers blynyddoedd mawr, a mae'n dda i weld y pleidi eraill nawr yn dechrau sylweddoli mae dyna yw'r peth derbyniol i'w wneud. Ond mae, wrth gwrs, y modd yma bobl yn cofrestru ar gyfer pleidleisio wedi bod yn newid. Mae hynny wedi cyflwyno nifer o heriau. Ydych chi'n cytuno gyda fi petai yr oed pleidleisio yn cael ei estyn i bobl iau, yna fydde angen ymgyrch falle tebyg i'r ymgyrch y missing million yn yr Alban pan fyddai'n dod i referendwm posib?
O'n i ddim o blaid newid y system fel oedd e. O'n i weld efo'n gweithio'n ddigon da. Ond mae'n bwysig dros ben, a fi'n gwybod bod pawb yn y siambr hyn yn rannu'r safbwynt hyn, bod pawb yn cofrestru i bleidleisio. Ac wrth gwrs bydd hwnna'n wir, nid dim ond hynny sydd yn 1 ar 15 neu 2 ar 15, ond pawb sydd ar hawl i bleidleisio. A'r ofans dy fi yw a rai eraill y bydd bobl yn cwmpo allan o'r gofrestrwr, ac fydd hwnna wrth gwrs yn meddwl byddai llai o bobl yn gallu cael yr hawl i ddweud i barn yn ystod etholiad.
Question 2, Mike Hedges.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the take-up of MMR vaccinations in Wales?
Yes, the take-up has improved. For example, by June of this year, 96.3% of 2-year-olds had received their first dose of the MMR vaccine. All health boards reached the target. And uptake of the second dose by the age of 5 was 92.8%.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response? And I, like him, I'm sure, very pleased to see those numbers, because that brings the herd immunity into the system and should stop another measles epidemic, which unfortunately we suffered from in Swansea, and unfortunately somebody died during that. What I will ask is, will the First Minister urge health boards to continue to promote take-up so we can keep at that level of above 95%, which is so important?
Yes, the NHS delivery framework does include the need to ensure that 95% of children are fully immunised for all routine vaccinations, not just for MMR by the age of 4. And of course, we continue to work with Public Health Wales and the health boards to meet our programme for government commitment to eradicate the health problems caused by MMR, by the 3 MMR viruses, by, of course, increasing uptake further of the vaccination itself.
Darren Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it's not just the MMR vaccine which is important, of course. There are a whole host of other vaccines which have targets to be achieved, one of which is the flu vaccination target for over 65s, which unfortunately has been missed so far in each of the past few years. And it's particularly a concern given that the frontline NHS staff take-up of the flu vaccine is lower than the Welsh Government's target as well. What action is your government taking particularly to ensure that NHS staff have their flu vaccinations where they have a frontline duty and that older people in Welsh society have those flu vaccines too?
Well, the question, of course, is about MMR vaccination particularly, but nevertheless, I'll answer his question. I have seen in GP surgeries and indeed in pharmacies a great deal of information being made available to people, informing them of the need to take up vaccination, particularly the elderly and those whose immune systems are compromised. I would expect, of course, local health boards to make sure that their staff are made as aware as possible of the advantages of the flu vaccination in order, of course, for them to avoid any problems during the course of the winter.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon, Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, would you agree with me that nobody should lose their sight from a treatable eye condition simply because their eye clinic is too busy to provide care within a clinically appropriate timescale?
I would, of course, expect people to get the appropriate treatment at the right time.
Thank you, First Minister. I welcome that commitment, but as you will have read from last week's RNIB Cymru's report into the number of people going blind unnecessarily in Wales, it made some pretty stark reading. The number of patients waiting over 36 weeks for their first appointment had tripled in just 2 years. Some clinics were reported being overbooked by some 50%. And age-related macular degeneration patients are waiting up to 6 weeks to be seen, when your guidance is quite clear to local health boards it should be no more than 2. Could you outline why your government is not able to provide the care that you say you want to see?
First of all, we don't necessarily accept the methodology in the RNIB report. It seems to be based on a very small sample, but nevertheless, in terms of the issue itself, we would expect the treatment to be made available. For example, if you look at wet macular degeneration, that is something that had no treatment in 2007. Now, of course, that treatment is available, and many people are now having their sight preserved as a result of the treatment that is available and is being made available to them in the Welsh NHS.
I hear what you say about the small sample. It's the reason why your Deputy Minister was so dismissive of the report last week. But the sample is no smaller than your college medical friends who advise you on the NHS, it seems. And it's not the fault of people with eye conditions that, thankfully, because of medical advancements, we now have treatments that we're not able to use a number of years ago. And we have to respond as a country to make sure people have access to those treatments. The fact here, the testimony, is from medical professionals working within the system who are telling you that they are seeing people who have lost their sight because of a failure to respond appropriately. Would you commit today to working with the RNIB, not dismissing their work, and the professionals quoted in the report, and undertake a thorough review of the ophthalmology services in Wales to ensure that in future not a single person will lose their sight unnecessarily?
We will, of course, work with the RNIB. Whilst the report itself is unclear in terms of its methodology, we have a very good relationship with the RNIB, and we would want to ensure that people, where they have the opportunity of having their sight preserved, or indeed having the deterioration of their sight slowed, that we would work with them and indeed, of course, with hospital ophthalmologists to make sure that people have the right access to treatment at the right time. And I think the success we're having with wet macular degeneration shows in particular how treatment, as soon as it's made available, is rolled out within the Welsh NHS.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you and I will disagree over the method with which your government has supported Cardiff Airport by going in and buying it. But I think we'd all be very disappointed with the news last week that Lufthansa were withdrawing their route to Düsseldorf on the back of, obviously, the Glasgow route being discontinued, the decline in passenger numbers by 7%, and the rather hastily departure of the Chief Executive at the end of August. Can you tell us what your take is on the current position that Cardiff Airport finds itself in?
Well, the first thing I can say to the Leader of the Opposition is that Lufthansa don't run the Cardiff-Dusseldorf route. It's run by Germanwings. And I know that the airport has been in discussions with Germanwings, I believe, this morning, and they are looking to see how the route can be preserved. The issue with the route is the aircraft, not with the sustainability of the route. But I think we have to accept that there will be times when routes start and they will come to an end. Of course, what we're looking for is a steady increase in the number of passengers using the airport. It'll dip, of course, during the course of the winter, as it always has, particularly in November and December. But we know that passenger satisfaction has increased enormously, and we're very optimistic about the airport's medium to long-term future.
First Minister, I agree with you. Money has been spent on the terminal building and there is a better passenger experience going through the airport. But regrettably, there are substantial negatives month in, month out coming from the airport in relation to route and route accessibility, with precious few new routes being announced, albeit I take the point about Ryanair, for example, announcing a once-a-week flight out to Tenerife. The Welsh Government has invested considerable sums of money in the airport. If you take the purchase price of £52 million, the loan of £10 million, in the budget that will be debated this afternoon, there's another £3.5 million for route development. As the only shareholder of that airport, where can you expect us to be looking at the future for Cardiff Airport in 12 months' time? A greater number of passengers, a larger diversification of routes, or what?
Both. A larger number of passengers. The airport will not lose money this year, as it did in the previous financial year, and that is a start. I think the strength of the airport lies in particular in long-haul flights. Bristol Airport has been very successful in short-haul flights and in business flights, and it will be very difficult to take Bristol on, if I can put it that way, in that regard. However, we do have great advantages over Bristol in terms of long-haul flights, in terms of the length of the runway, in terms of the 24-hour operation that we have, also in terms of the ability to widen the runway to take a fully laden A380. So that's where the advantages will come for us in the future. And I think it's fair to say that I should repeat what I've said before, that whilst we are at the moment the only shareholder in the airport, that does not mean that we would not want to introduce private investment in the future, and that is something that we will continue to have discussions about with potential investors.
First Minister, 12 months ago we came forward with our own blueprint for the airport, because obviously, in fairness, I always think from opposition, if you are prepared to criticise, you have to offer an alternative. And everyone who read the blueprint that we put forward said that it was a sensible business plan for taking Cardiff Airport forward. Scottish Government, for example, at Prestwick, have just signed up to an agreement with the Trump organisation, obviously who have big commercial interests in Scotland, to partner the Scottish Government in running the airport at Prestwick. Is it the intention now that in the next 12 months we will see the transatlantic routes that have been talked of at great length out of Cardiff Airport, and we will see other investors investing in Cardiff Airport, because it's nearly 2 years and since the Welsh Government purchased that airport? Or will it be your intention to be the sole shareholder of the airport?
No, is the answer to that. We would not want to be in a position where we lost control of the airport. And I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, we did not actively seek the purchase of the airport. It was offered to us somewhat out of the blue, and it was made clear to us that it was being offered to us and it would not be sold to another private company. And so the opportunity was there for us, and a decision had to be taken quickly. However, what we want to see is for private investors to come in to the airport, for them to buy shares in the airport. We want to work with private investors in that way, and there is interest there at the moment in terms of forming a public-private partnership with a view to developing the airport in the future. With the transatlantic routes, I caution against that being a holy grail. New York, for example, is a difficult route to run, because, of course, New York doesn't have a hub airport in the same way as Dubai is a hub airport, for example, or Singapore is a hub airport. New York has at least three different airports that airlines will fly into. So we have to be careful in terms of routes that we would seek to support, and to ensure, of course, that where we look to support international routes long haul, that they are to hub airports to attract more passengers who want to travel beyond the hub.
We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. Last week, I asked you, First Minister, if you supported parity with Scotland in terms of finance for Wales, and if you do, would you be seeking to secure a commitment in Labour's 2015 election manifesto to provide an additional £1.2 billion to Wales? You didn't answer that question on Question Time on Thursday. Would you like to answer it now?
Well, I don't know where £1.2 billion comes from. What we do know is that there's all-party agreement that the Holtham Commission identified £300 million, and that is what we say is the shortfall. I expect that shortfall to be addressed. I expect my party to address that shortfall. But as I said to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, there is a contradiction, is there not? We're saying on the one hand that Wales is owed £1.2 billion, and on the other saying that Wales should be independent and therefore get no money at all from Westminster.
First Minister, £1.2 billion would provide to Wales the same level per head funding as they get in Scotland. It's what parity with Scotland actually means. Now, on the 14th of September, you said, and I quote, "What is on offer to Scotland should be offered to Wales. There is no reason why Wales should be treated separately to Scotland." Now, I agree. There is no reason why Wales should be treated separately to Scotland. So if financial parity doesn't mean an extra £1.2 billion, and that's an extra £1.2 billion for investment in public services and our economy, then what exactly does equality with Scotland mean, First Minister?
As the Holtham Commission identified, and as your party accepted, it is to the tune of £300 million per year. I don't know where the £1.2 billion a year figure comes from. I've not seen the figures that back that up. And bear in mind as well, of course, is that Scotland has more devolved responsibilities than Wales. It is inevitable then that Scotland will get more money because Scotland has criminal justice functions, for example. What is important is that Wales receives the right level of funding per head. And we know that Holtham's work showed that that level of funding per head amounts to some £300 million. Unless she can provide the figures that show that Holtham is wrong and that her party is right, then clearly we're never going to get to a position where we can discuss this.
First Minister, it's per head funding that I'm talking about. Whose side are you on with this? It doesn't sound like you've given any thought at all as to what parity with Scotland actually means. Now, you failed to secure fair funding. When the BBC Wales interviewed your leader about the Barnett formula, your party leader said, "I'll look at it. I will look at it," is what he said. Now, have you made any serious representations to him? Has he made any serious commitments to you? And doesn't this really just reflect the fact that you run a Labour Party branch office here in Wales and that you have failed to stand up for the people of Wales on funding?
I'm sure that the member opposite will seek the support of her own leader, Nicola Sturgeon, because she spends more time with the SNP than she does here in Wales. And the reality is that we have said very clearly that we will address the issue of Wales's underfunding, but it comes back to the point that I made earlier on, and that is her party's objective is that Wales gets nothing at all from Whitehall or Westminster. If her party took the view that they did not want to pursue independence anymore, her argument would have more weight, I can put it that way. But you cannot say on the one hand, we want independence and no money from Whitehall, while at the same time arguing that you want £1.2 billion extra from Whitehall. It's independence or not. You need to make your mind up.
Thank you. We now move back to questions on the order paper, and question 3 is Gwenda Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Pa gamau sy'n cael ei cymryd I roi cyhoeddusrwydd i'r ymgynghoriad ar ddyfodol y gronfa byw'n annibynnol yng Nghymru?
Gwybodaeth i'r gronfa byw'n annibynnol ac awdurdodau lleol yng Nghymru iddyn nhw iddi cleientiaid. Mae'n amlinellu sut mae'r ymgynghoriad yn gweithio, gan nodi ei gyfeiriad ar wefan Llywodraeth Cymru a manylion ynghylch sut I ofyn am gopi os mae dyna yw dymuniad yr unigolyn.
Diolch am eich ateb, Brif Weinidog. Mae rhai sy'n derbyn o'r ILF a'i gofalwyr sydd yn aml a phwer a twrnau dros faterion I hanwyliad wedi bod yn pryderu am ddyfodol ILF yng Nghymru ers I Lywodraeth San Steffan gyhoeddi ei chau o Mehefin 2015. Brif Weinidog, awnewch I roi sicrwydd y bydd pontio di-dor gan yr ILF i'w chynllun olynol yng Nghymru, fel na fydd oedi a gofid di-angen yn digwydd, a wnewch I hefyd sicrhau derbynwyr ILF a'i gofalwyr y bydd eu lleisiau'n cael eu clywed yn ystod ymgynghoriad Llywodraeth Cymru.
Wrth gwrs, y lleddiall pam ma na ofid wrth gwrs ar ôl y datganiad gath I wneud. Gai ddweud wrth bobl bod ni wedi ymrwymo fel Llywodraeth I sicrhau bod trefniadau mewn lle mewn amser da mwyn sicrhau bod y gefnogaeth yna pan bydd y gronfa hunan yn cau, mwyn sicrhau bod bobl yn gallu parhau I fyw yn annibynnol yn gymuned. So, mae yna ymgynghoriad yn cymryd lle, a ni moyn sicrhau nid bod unigolion, dim ond unigolion yn gallu cael y cyfle I ddweud I barn, ond hefyd bod cyrff sydd yn cynrychioli bobl yn gallu gwneud hynny hefyd.
Susie Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. Good afternoon, First Minister. This, of course, is about the devolution of responsibility about who decides how financial support for people with a particular sort of disabilities is spent through financial support and how that financial support articulates the needs of individuals. So regardless of which of the schemes that is supported by the consultation responses in the end, can you guarantee that the money that comes from the UK will go into that scheme in its entirety?
Well, that's our intention. We want to make sure that the scheme is fully financed. The UK government is to transfer £20.4 million in the next financial year based on the estimated number of our recipients as at the 30th of June next year. The difficulty is, of course, what happens in future years, because that will be subject to future spending rounds.
Lindsay Whittle.
Minister, on October the 14th in this chamber, you rightly complained that the UK government devolves welfare issues, such as the Independent Living Fund, but without serious consideration of budget allocations. You've mentioned 20.4 million, but we're unclear of what's going to happen in the future. Can you tell us, therefore, if you or any of your officials have had any meetings with UK ministers on this issue to fight the corner for Wales, please?
Well, this is something, of course, that was thrown at us. We didn't ask for it. And therefore, this is something the UK government decided to transfer. With council tax benefits, of course, they skimmed money off the top before giving it to us. Our view is that this is not something we would have sought as a government. Nevertheless, we have a duty, and we want to ensure we hold ourselves to this duty to make sure that people in Wales are not frightened by the announcement that has been made, and we intend to make sure that as best we can, that the new arrangements are fully funded.
Alan Roberts.
Llywydd, prif weinidog, mae'r cynllun yma wedi gau ers rhyw 2007 I bob pwrpas I ymgeiswyr newydd. Dwi'n deall bod chi'n ymgynghori, mae yna benderfyniad I wneud os mae Llywodraeth Cymru fydd yn gweithredu'r cynllun neu Llywodraeth leol fel yn Lloegr, ond mae'r achos busnes ar hyn o bryd wedi gyfyngu I pobl sydd o fewn y cynllun yn barod. Be felly ydych chi'n gwneud I ystyried y bobl hynny sydd wedi cael eu cau allan o'r cynllun ers 2007?
Wel, mae rhaid ni sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bydd yna ddigon o arian ar gael mwyn cefnogi bobl sydd wedi cael cefnogaeth lan I nawr. Mae'n anodd dros ben wrth gofio'r maint sydd wedi cael ei drosglwyddo I ni fel Llywodraeth I weld sut allwn ni I ehangu y cynllun I hunan heb bod yna fwy o arian yn dod o Whitehall yn edrych felly yw'r sefyllfa ar hyn o bryd.
Question 4, Rina Bioedd.
Diolch, Llywydd. Wnaeth y prif weinidog ddatganiad ynglyn â dyfodol brecwast ysgol am ddim.
Wel, dan ddarpariaethau deddf safonau a threfnidiaeth ysgolion Cymru 2013, mae gofyn bod awdurdodau lleol yn cynnig brecwast am ddim ar bob diwrnod ysgol I ddisgyblion mewn ysgolion cynradd, a mae nhw'n I cynnal. A mae'r arian wedi cael ei roi iddyn nhw trwy'r grant cynnal revenue.
Diolch yn fawr I chi. Mae'r prif weinidog a finna yn gytun ynglyn â gwerth sicrhau nad oes yr un plentyn yng Nghymru yn dechrau'r diwrnod gwaith yn yr ysgol ar stumog gwag. Ond wrth i'r cyfrifoldeb yma gael ei wneud yn un statudol, be nath Llywodraeth Cymru, wrth gwrs, o'r tynnu oddi wrth y cynghora, y grant uniongyrchol oedd yn cael ei roi iddyn nhw I dalu am y gwasanaeth yma, sy'n achos Ynys Môn rhyw 400,000 o bunna ar flwyddyn. A wneud y prif weinidog gydnabod felly mae canlyniad y penderfyniad yna a'r amseriad yna oedd sicrhau bod y straen mwyaf posib yn cael ei roi ar gyllidebau cynghora lleol ar adeg, lle mae cyllidebau yn gostwng yn barod a pheryglu mwy o wasanaethau sy'n eisoes o dan fygythiad.
Wel, gath yr arian ddim I gymryd wrthyn nhw, gath yr arian I drosglwyddo mewn i'r grant revenue, fel o'n y moyn. Yna beth oedd awdurdodau lleol wedi gofyn amdano, bod yna lai o grantiau unigol ar gael a bod yr arian mewn i'r grant revenue, felly yna beth sydd wedi digwydd. So mae'r arian dal I fod yna I awdurdodau lleol, a os ydyn nhw ddim, wrth gwrs, yn gallu sicrhau bod brecwastau am ddim I plant yn ei ardaloedd I hunain, mae rhaid nhw esbonio yna i'r etholwyr lleol.
Anne Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm pleased that we did introduce free school breakfast for the reasons that Rhina Piorwas had just said, that no child should go to school and not be able to start their working day feeling hungry. I also wanted to talk about the nutrition of that breakfast and, and tie that into healthy eating, and whether the Estin have been able to report to you that it is having an effect on the way in which educational attainment for pupils is rising. And the other one is, it just bears my point that you mentioned that the grant had been rolled to RSG. Isn't it time we started to hypothecate such grants?
Well, of course, if local authorities do not fulfil the requirements of the legislation, we will have to take a view on that with regard to the way that money is distributed through the grant. But I can say, however, that through the Healthy Eating in Schools Wales measure of 2009, which came into force in September of last year, Estin will report for the first time on arrangements schools have made to implement the measure in their 2013 to 14 annual report, which is due to be published in the new year. That will be the first time, of course, when the contents of that report will be made available.
Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, picking up on Rhina Piorwas' points about how tight councils are now finding themselves for funding, will this government look at enabling the local county councils to charge those who can afford it for free school breakfast? It is an initiative which I heartily support, but I send my child to breakfast every single day because it enables my husband and myself to work. It's a great economic benefit. It enables a cheap childcare, and it has a substantial benefit to the economy. But when these councils are struggling so hard to find funding, if those who can afford to pay, and those who cannot afford to pay are protected and given the food that they need, then surely everybody will win.
Can I welcome the member back to the chamber, first of all? I know she's been away for some time, and it's always good to see a member return after some months, and I do welcome her back. In terms of the question itself, we do, of course, provide the funding for local authorities for them to implement, to provide rather free school breakfast. If we were to start charging, there are two consequences. First of all, it would cut across a manifesto commitment that we made. And secondly, it would mean that local councils would have even less money, because if they start charging, we would have to recoup the money that they earn through charges back through the revenue support grant. So from their point of view, there'd be no better off. Now, we prefer a system where we provide free school breakfasts for all, where there is no stigma attached to those who receive free school breakfast, and of course to make sure that children have the opportunity of a good meal at the start of the day, in order that they are able to be in a position where they can learn better throughout the day.
Aled Roberts.
Diolch. Prif Weinidog, dwi'n derbyn bod o'n ymrwymiad manifesto gennych, ond mae'r wybodaeth diweddar yn dangos mae ond rhyw 2% o'r plant sy'n derbyn y cynnig o frecwast am ddim erbyn hyn. Felly ydych chi'n barod i ystyried i weld os fyse'n bosib edrych ar bolisi yn Lloegr ynglyn â prydau amser cinio am ddim, mwyn i weld os oes yna unrhyw fath o welliant o ran cyrhaeddiad plant, heblaw am y ffaith bod ein derbyn mae ymrwymiad manifesto cynt sydd ganddo chi.
Fel se rhyw fath o ddadl yn cymryd lle fan hyn ar ynglyn â pryd yn y dydd dyle plant cael bwyd am ddim. Brecwast, wrth gwrs, yw beth ni moyn gweld, ond gael ddweud, mae i ddweud hwn wrth y rhyddfrydwyr. Fi wedi clywed y rhyddfrydwyr yn beirniadu brecwastau am ddim yn y siambr hyn, ond wedyn ni yn canmol cael cino am ddim yn y siambr hyn. Ond fe wedodd Kirsty Williams, fel arweinydd y rhyddfrydwyr ynglyn â'r brecwastau, taw Happy Meals o nhw. Os da Happy Meals yw brecwast, beth felly cino amser cino? Dwi ddim yn gweld bod yna wahaniaeth. Na, barn ni yw y brecwast yw'r amser o'r dydd i gael bwyd i blant mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n gallu dechrau dydd ar sylfaen cadarn.
Question 5, Elin Jones.
Pa drafodaethau mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Gyfunol mewn perthynas a chynlluniau i yswirio tai sydd o dan fygythiad gan lifogydd?
Llawer o drafodaethau. Mae trafodaethau ynghylch insiwrans lifogydd wedi bod yn cael cynnal ers dros flwyddyn. Yr wythnos diwethaf cydnabodd Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig ein pryderon ynghylch y cynllun sy'n cael ei ffafrio, sef Flood Re. A maen nhw wedi cytuno ar drefn sy'n golygu na fydd yn rhaid i berchnogion tai Cymru dalu mwy na gweddill y Deyrnas Unedig.
Wel, os ga i weid, mae hynna'n newyddion
arbennig o dda, newyddion o'n i ddim yn ymwybodol o, oherwydd oedd cynllun oedd Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Gyfunol yn ei ffafrio, yn mynd i roi tai yng Nghymru o dan anfantes sylweddol iawn, tŷ gwerth 250 o filoedd o bunnau, mae'n debyg yng Nghymru yn talu 162 o bunnau yn fwy y flwyddyn o insiwrans. Felly, os ydy Llywodraeth Deyrnas Gyfunol wedi cydnabod yr anhegwch yma, dwi'n falch iawn o hynny, a felly gallwch chi roi mwy o wybodaeth i ni pan fyddwch chi'n gwbl sicr i bod nhw yn mynd i roi cynllun ar waith sydd llawn mor ffafriol yng Nghymru a beth yw yn Lloegr.
Ie, byddai'r cynllun o'n wedi meddwl amdano tro cynta, wedi meddwl byddai mwy na 20,000 o dau yng Nghymru, lle byddwn wedi talu mwy na'r tai cymharol yng ngweddill Deyrnas Unedig. So felly, oedd e'n bleser mawr i weld bod nhw wedi newid i meddyliau a bod nhw wedi cytuno i ffordd ymlaen nawr sydd yn sicrhau bod yna gyfartaledd rhwng Cymru a gweddill Deyrnas Unedig.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I've raised in this chamber many times the disgust of my constituents when the Prime Minister came over the border into Wales to announce a scheme that would only apply to English homes. The Secretary of State at the time fully supported that. Now we've had a change of Secretary of State for Wales. Have you had any meaningful discussions about how we can move forward together so that when somebody's flooded wherever they happen to live, that we offer them the support that they need?
Well, we have, of course, as a government, in all that we did after the storms in January. It was a curious statement by the Prime Minister at that time to come to Pembrokeshire and announce a scheme that wouldn't apply in Pembrokeshire, which was really a lesson to him regarding devolution, and hopefully it's a lesson that they've learned in Whitehall.
Sandbach?
First Minister, no new homes built on floodplains since 2009 will qualify for the flood re-insurance scheme unless that position has now changed as a result of your negotiations. Can you outline what Welsh Government is doing, what action Welsh Government is taking to inform homeowners of those properties that they won't be covered by the flood re-scheme, and also perhaps what action you're taking to notify local councils of their liability if they grant planning permission on floodplains, because of course that's why the insurers won't insure homes that were built on floodplains post 2009.
To your party's scheme. Flood Re is a UK government scheme. It's for the UK government to explain their positioning on that. And it's for UK government to ensure that they inform local councils of the reasoning for their decision. It's not for us to defend or indeed to propagate what UK government does. It's for them to explain to the people of Wales.
Helen Parrott.
Thank you for your earlier answer. Many constituents of mine in the Roath and Pennylan areas of Cardiff have experienced problems with getting any home insurance at all due to a perceived flood risk from Roath Brook, despite their property not having been personally affected. I'm grateful to Natural Resources Wales for their action and actually their active engagement with the community in terms of remedial works that are planned. But how can you ensure that information that insurers use to set their risk levels is kept up to date with regards to flood risk? When remedial works are actually done?
I would expect insurers, of course, I expect the Association of British Insurers, particularly as the umbrella organisation, to make sure that they are fully aware of the latest flood risk advice from Natural Resources Wales. This is something that has been done, to my knowledge, over the past few years. I remember when the TAN was first introduced, TAN 15, there was great controversy in this chamber at the time when I introduced that as Minister. But what happened when that TAN was introduced is that there was flexibility within the TAN to make sure that where there were specific instances where what appeared to be a property at risk of flooding on a map was actually protected because of a natural feature, for example, such as a large bank, that was built into the methodology that NRW used. So I would expect the insurers to look at the up-to-date information that NRW have at their disposal.
Question 6, Mark Isherwood.
Minister, outline Welsh Government support for people with autistic spectrum disorders in Wales.
Yes, as the member knows, since 2008, the Autistic Spectrum Disorder Strategic Action Plan has been delivering support for people with autism. There is an ASD lead in every local authority and a local stakeholder group. We also fund the Community Monitoring Support Project and the ASD Adults Diagnostic Network to support adults with autism.
Well, Thank you for that. Well, you might be aware there's growing concern in the autism community, people on the spectrum, their carers and families, not only over the delays with refreshing of the strategy, but over news that the 44,000 paid, or the 40,000 paid annually to each local authority, £880,000 a year for the ASD infrastructure grant to support services for people with autism is going to lose its protection and go into the local government revenue grant at a time when budgets are generally under pressure, and the community is asking for this money to continue to receive its protection as a commitment from the Welsh Government to the ongoing strategy. I would welcome your response accordingly.
I do know that this is an issue, and I know the National Autistic Society have expressed some concerns about this. But can I make it absolutely clear that we have, I believe, a good system of support in place through local authorities for those who are on the spectrum with autism. I would expect that to remain in place. If we find that local authorities, even though the money is being distributed through the Revenue Support Grant, are weakening the structure that we have in place at the moment, then clearly we'd have to examine how that weakening could be fortified in the future.
Christine Chapman.
Thank you. First Minister, I'm in contact with Cennin Valley Pals, a group of families whose children live with autism, ADHD and Asperger's, and they tell me of the many challenges they face at home and at school as a result. We know that many children and young people with autism find the prospect of sitting exams particularly daunting. This may be attributed to the school environment or the fact that they've missed out on lessons as a result of their condition. We know that they need regular movement breaks to help keep their concentration. How can we ensure, First Minister, a more consistent approach across education in supporting these young people? And would you agree that it's important to get it right when they're young to ensure that their futures are not blighted as a result?
Of course, I think that is something we would all agree with within the Chamber. I can say that the Equality Act of 2010 does place a duty upon awarding bodies to make reasonable adjustments for disabled learners taking general qualifications such as GCSEs and A-levels. In terms of what is devolved for literacy and numeracy tests, we give guidance to schools on access arrangements for pupils for additional learning needs, including suggestions about how tests might be delivered. And that includes autism within the guidance and other learning difficulties which affect concentration. So there is guidance in place, building on, of course, what is already there in the Equality Act.
Alan Fred Jones.
Mae nifer o achosion wedi dod i'n sylwi yn yr etholaeth gan rieni sy'n nodi bod ysgolion yn gwrthod neu'n methu adnabod y cyflwr ac anghenion y plant yn y maes yma. Mae amryw o rieni yn gorfod mynd yn breifat hyd yn oed mwyn cael diagnosis cyn bod ysgolion yn fodlon cydnabod a cyn I bod nhw hyd yn oed yn sôn am ymateb wedyn gyda'r rhaglen briodol. Felly pa arweiniad ydych chi fel Llywodraeth ni roi I awdurdodau lleol I sicrhau bod plant yn cael ei adnabod, rhai sydd angen cael ei adnabod gyda'r cyflwr yma ac yn ymateb yn briodol?
Wel, byddwn ni erbyn wrth gwrs I sicrhau bod nhw'n adnabod y plant hyn. Dwi ddim yn deall pan byddwn nhw'n mynd yn breifat mwyn cael diagnosis. Ond mae yna ddretoedd ar bob awdurdod lleol I mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n rhoi'r gwasanaethau dilyn nhw I blant sydd ag anghenion arbennig a hefyd wrth gwrs plant sydd yn awtistaidd. So felly, os yna unrhyw enghraifft o hwnna ddim yn digwydd, fi'n sicr byddai gweinidog yn eisiau gwybod amdano fe.
Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you'll be aware of the case of Claire Dyer, who lives in my region. And one of the issues that have arisen as a result of her particular circumstances is it's become evident that there are no low or medium secure inpatient specialist autism services in South Wales and very little in the way of non-secure hospital provision. And whilst that position also applies in parts of England, England does have the benefit of specialist autism community services and support which does not exist in Wales at the moment, so far as I'm aware. And in addition, there is no consultant specialising in autism located in South Wales. Can I ask you what the Welsh Government is doing to try to address that situation?
I'll ask the Minister to write to you on that. I can say, though, I understand that Claire was discharged from where she had previously been and is now at the family home in Swansea. Ministers clearly can't intervene in an individual patient's care, I beg your pardon. I understand that it was a decision of the team caring for her that led to her being placed where she was placed. I don't go into any more detail in fairness to her, but perhaps if the Minister could write to you with the details, with the issues that you have raised, and to answer you with more detail.
Question 7, Lynn Eagle.
What assessment has the First Minister made of the Older People's Commissioner's report into standards within care homes in Wales?
Well, the report is a detailed review of the quality of life in residential care. There are some examples of excellent care throughout the report. There are 43 recommendations, however, in the report, and they are largely in line with the Welsh Government's existing plans to implement them.
Thank you, First Minister, and I'm sure you'll agree that this is a landmark report that raises some really fundamental questions, not just in relation to standards within Welsh care homes, but more widely in terms of the way in which we as a society support and care for people in their old age. It's clear to me that a step change is required if we are to confront the issues that have been highlighted, and making progress will require concerted effort across the Welsh Government. Working with the Health Minister, will you commit to playing a leading role in that process so that this report represents a line in the sand, and so that we can begin to address these long-standing issues that are so detrimental to the quality of life of older people living in residential care?
Absolutely, and there are two issues that I can point to in terms of us moving forward. Work is already underway in relation to a number of recommendations within the document, and a care home task and finish group, as I mentioned in the Chamber last week, is already in effect. That was established in July. Its role is to ensure effective oversight and coordination of action to ensure the quality and sustainability of care in the sector. On top of that, of course, we have the white paper, which sets out our proposals to strengthen the regulation and inspection of social services, and many of the recommendations that were in the report are contained within the reforms that we propose to introduce through the draft bill that will be put before the Assembly in February.
Anything Saunders.
So the number of care homes in Wales failing now to provide for more than the most basic of older people's needs, and the total disregard for their personal identity and individuality, made reading Sarah Rashira's report incredibly alarming. First Minister, do you agree with the Older People's Commissioner that the findings of this report show that too many of today's care home residents are now sadly becoming institutionalised? And what assurances will you give that the findings in this report will be acted upon, and that the excellent work by the Older People's Commissioner will go forward and actually influence future policy and legislation in order to protect our most vulnerable and certainly our older people in society?
Well, I would argue that's already in effect with the task and finish group and, of course, the white paper, when there will be an opportunity for members to strengthen the regulatory and inspection regime so as to make sure that there is greater consistency in the sector.
Bethan Jenkins.
Prif Weinidog, byddwn ni'n gytuno gyda'r sylwadau mae'r doi aelod cynulliad wedi wneud eisoes a'r Comisiynydd sydd wedi dweud y peth pwysig yn hyn yw deall sut mae pobl hŷn yn mynd i deall bod eu hawliau yn mynd i cael eu gwella mewn ffordd gweithredol, ac felly eisiau dangos ganddoch chi sut mae hynny'n mynd i ddigwydd. Enwedig yn yr aspect o hunan ariannu, dyn ni'n gweld o'r adroddiad, mae lot fawr o bobl sydd wedi cael eu hunan ariannu yn ofni dod ac unrhyw problemau ger bron, oherwydd bod nhw ddim yn cael y cefnogaeth gan yr awdurdod lleol, enghraifft, neu efallai bod nhw ddim yn gallu mynd i cael eu rhoi allan o'r sefyllfa maen nhw ynddo, ac felly hynny oedd y peth oedd yn dod trwyddo yn glir iawn gan yr adroddiad Prif Weinidog.
Wel, beth sy'n bwysig am yr adroddiad hyn yw yn dangos bod y Comisiynydd ei hunan yn neud y gwaith bydd erbyn iddi hi wneud. I ddangos le mae'r gwendidau tu fewn i'r system, a hefyd i ddangos le mae pethau'n cael ei wneud mewn ffordd ardderchog. A'r nod wrth gwrs yw sicrhau bod hwnna sydd ddim lan i'r safon lan i nawr yn dod lan i'r safon sydd gyda'r gorau. I wneud hynny, wrth gwrs, fe wedi si yn gynharach. Mae gyda ni'r grŵp gweithredol sydd wedi cael ei sefydlu, ag wrth gwrs y papur gwyn bydd yn arwain at sicrhau bod deddfwriaeth gyda ni sydd yn rhoi mwy, sydd yn gwarchod bobl yn fwy yn y dyfodol, mwyn sicrhau bod bobl ddim yn teimlo os maen nhw'n cwyno, felly maen nhw'n perygl o gael ei daflu allan o'r cartref. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth, wrth gwrs, byddwn ni moyn osgoi pob tro.
Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, the Commissioner pointed to a lack of voice and control that many older people have when entering into care. Only yesterday I was approached by a family whose elderly relative had hoped to enter into a care home in Glynneath, which would allow him to continue to see his friends, his family, to visit the library daily and to visit his church twice a week. Unfortunately, as he's a Powys resident in the Pontneath Vaughan area of Powys, at the last minute, Powys declined to place him in the Neath Talbot home and moved him to a home within the county, miles away from his social contacts and his ability to carry on living the life that he is able to lead. Would you agree with me that county councils should make placements based on the well-being of individuals and not on their own convenience within county boundaries?
Well, how many times have we said we want local authorities to work together and not see boundaries as the modern equivalent of the Berlin Wall? I'm familiar with that part of her constituency that is effectively part of some parts of the Neath Valley, some parts of the Dillais Valley, and of course they have an affinity with the settlements further down towards the coast because they're physically closer. In the same way as we have always said that we would not want people who live in the border towns of Brecon and Radnor to be forced to travel to Cardiff or Newport for treatment when it's available in Hereford or in perhaps in Shrewsbury. In the same way, we would not want people to travel many miles from their communities and away from places they have lived all their lives simply because of the need to stay within a county boundary.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2, which is the business statement, and I